Sometimes a woman lives two entirely different lives for 47 years, and no one realizes it until the truth comes out on Dr. Phil's stage. Stop the tape. Stop it right now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio with precision. The cameras halted. The audience reacted in shock. On the couch, a 65-year-old woman named Margaret sat trembling, gripping a sealed envelope in her unsteady hands. What she was about to share would completely change everything her family believed. No one, the audience, the crew, or even Dr. Phil, was ready for what was coming. 12 hours earlier, Margaret had arrived at the studio believing she was there to talk about family communication problems. That's what the producers had told her daughter Sarah, who applied months earlier, hoping to understand why her mother had become withdrawn and secretive. Sarah now sat in the audience, watching her mother on stage, unaware that within minutes her entire view of her family would shift. Dr. Phil began the segment in his usual straightforward manner. "Margaret, your daughter says you've been keeping secrets. She says there are phone calls you avoid in front of the family, trips you take without explanation. Tell me what's happening." Margaret had practiced her answers. She planned to talk about needing space, wanting privacy, and the normal boundaries between adults. Safe explanations she thought would be enough. But Dr. Phil looked beyond the surface and focused on what she was avoiding. "Margaret, I'm going to ask you something. And I need you to be honest. With me, with your daughter, and with yourself." The studio fell completely quiet. Even the camera operator paused. "How long have you been living a double life?" The question filled the room with tension. Margaret's face went pale. Her hands shook harder. The envelope she carried, the one producers asked her to bring, the one she assumed would never be opened, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I don't know what you mean," she whispered, though her voice revealed the truth. Dr. Phil leaned forward, not with anger, but with clarity and determination. "Margaret, I've been doing this for 21 years. I can tell when someone is holding a secret so big it's affecting every part of their life. That envelope you're holding, what's in it?" What happened next became one of the most discussed moments in the show's history. Margaret's hands shook harder, tears streamed down her face. In the audience, Sarah rose to her feet, stunned and frightened. "Mom, what's happening?" Dr. Phil raised his hand toward her. "Sarah, please sit down. Your mother is about to share something important, and she needs to do this in her own way." Then Dr. Phil did something unusual for the show. He left his seat, walked over to Margaret, and sat beside her, not across from her, but next to her, as a person offering support. "Margaret, whatever is in that envelope, whatever you've been keeping inside, it's time. You've shouldered this alone for far too long. Let me help you carry it." The cameras captured everything. Margaret's tears, her shaking hands, and her eyes fixed on the envelope as if it held her entire life story. Then she spoke. I have another family." The studio reacted not with noise, but with complete shock. Sarah's face went pale. The audience gasped. Even the experienced crew exchanged wide-eyed looks. Dr. Phil remained steady. "Keep going. For 47 years, Margaret said, her voice breaking, I've lived two separate lives. I have a husband here in California. That's Sarah's father, David. We've been married for 48 years. She paused, struggling to breathe. "But I also have a husband in Arizona. His name is Robert. We've been married for 47 years, and we have 3 children together." The silence that followed felt overwhelming. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most significant part of this story is still to come. Dr. Phil's face showed something rarely seen, genuine surprise, but he quickly regained his composure. Hold on just a moment." He turned toward the control room. "Stop rolling. I need to talk to production." The studio lights stayed bright, but the recording stopped. Dr. Phil stepped off stage. For 3 long minutes, the audience waited in stunned silence while Margaret cried softly and Sarah sat frozen, unable to understand what she'd just heard. When Dr. Phil returned, his tone had shifted. This was no longer just a segment. It had become an intervention, a confession, and a family crisis all unfolding at once. "Margaret, before we move forward, I need to know, do both families know you're here today?" Margaret shook her head. "Robert thinks I'm visiting my sister in San Diego. He doesn't know about this show. My children in Arizona, they don't know about Sarah. They don't know about David. They don't know about my other life." Dr. Phil sat down slowly. "And the envelope?" Margaret lifted it with trembling hands. "It contains letters. 47 years of letters I wrote but never sent, to both families, explaining everything and apologizing for everything. Dr. Phil accepted the envelope gently. May I? Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Dr. Phil opened the envelope and pulled out stacks of handwritten pages. Letters dated from 1978 to 2024. Some began with, Dear David and Sarah, while others opened with, Dear Robert and my Arizona family. They described how everything started, how it continued, and how the guilt had weighed on her for nearly 50 years. Dr. Phil read one aloud, his tone steady but filled with emotion. I never meant for this to happen. I met David in college. We fell in love and got married. Later, I accepted a job in Arizona and met Robert. I promised myself I would end it. I told myself every day for 47 years that I would walk away. But I didn't. I love them both. I built families with both. And every day of my life has been a lie. What followed was something no one in the room, or watching at home, expected. Dr. Phil set the letters down carefully. Then, in a rare moment, he became emotional. Margaret, do you understand what you've done? Not just to yourself, but to the people you say you care about. Margaret nodded through tears. I know. I know I'm a terrible person. Dr. Phil shook his head firmly. You're not a monster. You're a human being who made a choice 47 years ago and then stayed stuck in it. You can't undo 47 years. You can't fix all of this, but you can stop making it worse. He turned to the audience. Sarah, I know this is painful, but your mother came here today because she couldn't carry this secret any longer. She brought that envelope because she wants to stop lying. Sarah stood up, tears falling. How could you do this? To Dad? To me? Come here, Dr. Phil said gently. Talk to your mother. Sarah walked onto the stage, shaking. She stood in front of Margaret, silent for several moments. Then she spoke words that broke the entire room. Who am I? If half my life wasn't true, then who am I? Margaret looked at her daughter and, for the first time in 47 years, told the full truth. You are the daughter I loved every single day. Everything I did with you was real. My love for you was not a lie. I was the lie. I hid who I was. But you, Sarah, you were always real. Dr. Phil stood. We're going to take a break. But before we do, I need to say something to everyone here and everyone watching. He looked into the camera. This isn't a story about good and bad. It's a story about decisions and consequences. Margaret made a choice 47 years ago, and she repeated that choice every day for nearly half a century. Now 2 families will face the impact of those decisions. Turning back to Margaret, he continued, After the show, you and I will meet with the team. We'll contact Robert. We'll arrange counseling for both families. This doesn't end today. This is where the real work begins. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. The envelopes sat between them, representing 47 years of hidden truth finally exposed. When the show returned, Dr. Phil had already arranged for therapists to work with both families. Legal experts were brought in to discuss the implications of bigamy. Margaret was assigned individual therapy to address the psychological strain of living 2 lives for so long. But most importantly, Dr. Phil helped turn a painful revelation into the first step toward healing. Margaret, you can't change the past, but you can choose what happens now. You can keep hiding, or you can face the consequences with honesty and courage. I want to tell the truth, Margaret said, now more composed. Everything. To everyone. Dr. Phil nodded. And we'll help you do that. Not on TV, not for ratings, but privately, with professionals, mediators, and the support you'll need. He turned to Sarah. You're going to need support too. Learning that your family history is different than you believed is traumatic. We're arranging therapy for you with a specialist in family trauma. The show ended with Margaret and Sarah sitting together. Not reconciled, not hugging, but present. The envelope of letters sat between them. No longer a secret, but the beginning of long, difficult conversations. Dr. Phil's final message to the audience captured the moment. Sometimes the truth doesn't free you immediately. Sometimes the truth is the beginning of the hardest work you'll ever face. But it's still better than living a lie. 6 months later, the aftermath was still ongoing. Dr. Phil stayed in contact with both families through the therapeutic team. Margaret told Robert everything. The Arizona family was deeply hurt. Both husbands had begun divorce proceedings. The 3 Arizona children cut contact with their mother. Sarah continued intensive therapy, trying to sort through her childhood memories and the reality of her mother's double life. But something else had changed, too. Margaret had stopped pretending. For the first time in 47 years, she woke up each day as one person instead of two. The relief, she told her therapist, felt almost as strong as the guilt. "I damaged two families," she admitted in a later session. "But I also released them from a falsehood. They deserve a life built on truth, even if that truth is difficult." The envelope of letters was never shown publicly, never aired on television or used for dramatic effect. Instead, Dr. Phil helped Margaret bring those letters into family therapy sessions, handled carefully and privately with professional support. Some letters were shared aloud during counseling, while others stayed confidential, but each served a purpose. They demonstrated to both families that Margaret had always known what she was doing, had battled with it internally, and ultimately reached a point where she could no longer maintain the deception. Dr. Phil summed it up clearly during their final off-camera conversation. "You didn't come here to be forgiven. You came because you couldn't keep living this way. That's the first step toward becoming who you need to be." The impact of that episode ran deep. It sparked national conversations about the psychology behind deception, the meaning of identity, and the long-term effects of living dishonestly. Mental health experts used it as a case study to understand how people divide their lives into hidden parts. Family therapists referenced it when working with clients facing betrayal and damaged trust. But most significantly, it reminded millions that Dr. Phil's show wasn't just entertainment. It focused on real people, real struggles, and real consequences. It showed how television could be used to support healing, even when that healing was complicated, imperfect, and painful. Margaret's story didn't end happily, but it ended truthfully. And sometimes that is the only resolution that matters. The envelope remained in Dr. Phil's office, a symbol that some burdens are too heavy for one person to carry, and that honesty, even when devastating, is still better than a lie. Years later, Dr. Phil looked back on the episode in an interview. "People ask me about the hardest show I've ever filmed," he said. "Margaret's story always stands out, not because it was shocking, but because it was deeply human. She wasn't malicious. She was caught in a decision she made at 18. And with every year that passed, the lie grew until it took over her entire life." He paused, recalling the moment in the studio. When she opened that envelope, she wasn't just uncovering a secret. She was exposing her whole inner world. Every letter was a confession she had written but never managed to send. For 47 years, she documented the lie she lived. That isn't the behavior of someone without conscience. It reflects someone experiencing serious psychological distress. The therapeutic community praised the episode as a strong example of crisis intervention. Dr. Phil had balanced the compelling nature of the revelation with genuine therapeutic support. He didn't use Margaret's pain for ratings. He used the moment to connect her with the help she urgently needed. That's the goal, Dr. Phil later explained. Television can do good when it's used responsibly. Margaret came to the show because she knew she needed help, and she understood that doing it publicly would keep her accountable. She couldn't withdraw. She couldn't continue the deception. The cameras ensured she followed through.